First up is Georgia.
Hello. Hi, I'm Georgia. I'm one of the young leaders on this project and with Leaders Unlocked. I work with the Leaders Unlocked on multiple projects. We Leaders Unlocked work on with multiple sort of groups of people across the UK on racial justice, education, crime, policing, mental health, the care system. You name it, you probably do something like it. I'm not going to stand here listening. I hope things tell me something. So yeah, I first got involved in Leaders Unlocked in 2021. I want to say, kind of sniffed this, so that might be wrong. So obviously we're in and out of lockdowns at that point. I'm sure you can all remember. So I was in 2 weeks before the first lockdown. I moved out of children's home into my own place. So that was quite a big, as you can imagine, moving from a children's home into your own place, quite a big step. And I moved 30 miles to a place that was nearer to where I was brought up than where I was in the children's home was, but still not very close to where I was brought up, if that makes sense. So I had very little support. I had a social worker, but he was kind of, because of my age, he was kind of like at the end of a work with me, and my personal advisor, which is a leaving care worker that you get from the local authority living care after you turn 18. He didn't have to do anything with me because I wasn't 18, so I kind of had no support. The children's home couldn't support me because I wasn't on the book anymore, and because I was on my own and in my own place, everyone was like, "Oh yeah, you're functioning." And obviously, I was in college at the time. My mental health went downhill because I was locked in a flat by myself with no support. There was a national virus there was a pandemic going on. It was quite lonely. My mental health went downhill, and because I appeared to be functioning, I got no support. My mental health was just at rock bottom, and it kind of a lot of care leavers and care experiencing people kind of felt neglected, lost, abandoned, kind of like we didn't really exist to anyone, and we were kind of like out of sight, out of mind, which is a theme in the independent care review. Yeah, it kind of just the pandemic definitely helped mental health issues have a resurgence, if not make them pre-existing ones worse. So yeah, we definitely felt, as a care leaver, as someone who had mental health issues, there was a lot of feelings of abandonment, I guess.
Thank you, Georgia. So hi everyone, my name is Tammy. I am a young person under Leaders Unlocked. So I've been with Leaders Unlocked since 2021, 2022. So I've been obviously privileged to work with them on a numerous amount of projects and workshops, definitely focusing on mental health and those concerning young people. My motivation for working with the research project with LSE was to essentially put young people at the forefront of the change and the conversations that we're having post-pandemic. Especially giving them a sense of agency that I feel like personally they lost during the pandemic, and making sure that they are not just being talked around, but they are being spoken with, and that they are a priority in the conversations that we have concerning support that we can give for them in the event of a potential pandemic in the future. Fingers crossed that doesn't happen again. So I just wanted to reflect on, from my own personal story, mental health and the mental health services. So during the pandemic, I, like many other young people, were still under the duty of care of CAMS, the Child Adolescent Mental Health Service. So obviously, as you are aware, probably with COVID, that exacerbated many pre-existing mental health conditions that a lot of people had, exacerbating the feelings of loneliness, isolation, and making people feel just not themselves really, if they weren't really feeling their strongest beforehand. And many branches of CAMS anyway were falling short of the required care and support that they were meant to be giving for young people. And no matter how we debate the efficacy of CAMS as a service before the pandemic, it was for a lot of people a source of routine, a source of support, or a resource that was just ripped from people without really any sort of conversation or transition. For many people, they had to go from what was essentially counselling with a human touch to 15-minute phone calls every now and then that was sometimes often forgotten. And if you were categorized as a person of low risk compared to those of high risk, you were seen as a lower priority, often kind of shelved, and it left young people feeling very neglected and abandoned, as Georgia said for a previous point. And going on to that as well, the sustainability of CAMS during the pandemic was also called into question. Almost 250,000 young people did not receive any sort of mental health service or support during the pandemic. And as you can understand, that is completely unacceptable. There were also people like myself who were in that stage where they were about to become 18 during the pandemic. So obviously when you are 18, you transition from the child and adolescent mental health service unit to adult services. But again, there is this idea of a criteria. If you don't fit the criteria, you are essentially shelved, and that's not giving any consideration to if you're on medication already, if you are needing a lot of support and you might be transitioning to a further stage of education, or you might just genuinely need the support, because why should there be criteria for the support that you need? And I also wanted to mention that for other young people who couldn't be here today to kind of bring their own personal stories, there were people who struggled with the digital inequalities during the pandemic, and for things like phone calls or needing a digital device to connect with CAMS and that service, they weren't able to do that because they did not have the facilities themselves. Ultimately, I just wanted to shed a light on the fact that young people were left to feel very unimportant and neglected and abandoned during the pandemic. And obviously, looking forward from this should not happen again.
Hi everyone, I'm Medina. I'm from Leicester, and I joined Leaders Unlocked purely because of my own experiences, my own negative experience in the pandemic. Although many had positive experiences, a lot of marginalized young people felt, as my peers have said, abandoned. And I think one of the reasons why this abandonment was felt so strongly within my peer group is because of the previous youth clubs and different social spaces that bridges the space between school and home were scrapped, especially in particular when the Tories became into governance. And all the rest of any remaining private or public youth spaces were also scrapped due to underfunding or budget cuts with the pandemic and the new cost of living crisis. This hasn't changed after the pandemic, as everyone is so used to their own isolation that people are tending to just deal with their own problems until they are seen as high risk and they are in need of critical care. And I feel like there are so many steps that we can take to avoid getting to that point. Me personally, I struggled with social anxiety. I was put on medication during the pandemic. I didn't really even go on walks because I felt very into myself, and I felt I didn't need to talk to anybody. I didn't feel the need to share my story because I thought I was different. I thought I was weird. I didn't think anyone else thought like me. But even after the pandemic, when we were supposed to go back to normal, everybody wasn't having those conversations, and young people weren't told that what you were going through was acknowledged. And what it didn't feel acknowledged, and we felt kind of left in this weird limbo between having to come back to school and still going through the weird process of being in a pandemic. Because when have you ever been in a pandemic before? It's never ever happened. There may have been some positives for some people as reconnecting with family or stuff like that, but a lot of people, either domestic abuse or living in bad households or just having a negative experience with your family and not getting along with them, or even living alone as Georgia was, it can be quite difficult, and there weren't spaces for people to go through that. Finally, conversations were not open for young people to normalize their experiences, and therefore many just shut down and didn't engage with school or learning, leading to, as we saw, the decline in grades, especially after the pandemic, with people not doing their exams and all this weird mongering that was going around. Obviously, the government weren't doing that well to kind of update local communities and give them a head start with schools in the local systems.
Hi, my name is Aisha. I joined LSE in 2021 as well. What motivated me to join this research project was that I wanted to give voices to those who were struggling to speak up and to those who have not been heard in the education system, and change the struggles that people endured during the pandemic. What I wanted to put a light on was digital inequalities with the education system during the pandemic. I was in secondary school during the pandemic, and I was trying to get past, I was actually in and during online learning, I didn't really have access to resources because there were 6 people in my house. 4 of us were in school, 1 of us was in college, 3 of us were in secondary school, and my parents were both in uni at the time. Didn't have enough resources in the house, and I didn't have a laptop to go on to do online learning, which made me fall behind in school, which caused anxiety. Although the school offered to give me a laptop and I took it, the Wi-Fi wasn't really working as well, and I didn't really have good access as the Wi-Fi was, as the laptop was bad quality. This made me struggle to keep it with my friends and made me feel isolated, as we were talking about, and it made me struggle a lot to keep up, which later on caused a lot of failure in my year during exams. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Tia. I came across Leaders Unlocked through my cousin in the heart of 2020 when we were stuck in our homes in lockdown. I was inspired by the amazing young people who were given an amazing opportunity to be heard, because a lot of the time we don't feel like we're heard because we're young, and just because we're young doesn't mean that we don't know anything. We have views, we have thoughts, we have feelings, and soon this is going to be our world too. Like, we're going to be here for a long time, and our voices need to be heard, and I wanted to be part of that difference, and here I am. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. And here we have, before the pandemic was running on empty, and you may see a jug, and if you ever heard that saying, you either see the glass half full or half empty. As you know, the government was struggling before the pandemic, and this caused a knock-on effect, which was then echoing along, and kaboom. Like, we're here now, we're in a financial crisis. And there have been cuts to public services due to the austerity. The NHS was struggling, and they're still struggling. They promised us how many times that they were going to make differences, they were going to change things, they were going to fund more services, but instead they cut them. There has been way too many promises that they cannot keep, and then on top of that, new prime ministers, new things, everything is new, but no one's actually doing anything. It doesn't feel like it is, like anything is happening. Can we let this happen again? No. Are we going to let it happen again? We're going to try and make a difference at least. We're here. We need to make a difference. And I think proactive investment is certainly needed, but then where is the money? Because a lot of the time, I mean, how much are you paying in taxes? Do you know where your money is actually going? We want more. We want to learn, we want to know more. I think we need to work together collaboratively, especially with our local communities, and try and work on something where we can all unite, if that makes any sense. Sorry. But I think we were all struggling we just can't let this happen again.
Hello, I'm Deborah. I joined Leaders Unlocked actually on a project looking at young people and their views on the welfare state. And due to the pandemic, we actually had the interviews with young people online. And I participated in a couple of the research projects, and the impact of the pandemic was really heard throughout, within mental health, within social cohesion, and within communities. So I joined this project as I wanted to make sure that these stories would actually lead to a change in case of the next pandemic, and that these stories would not go to waste. So to summarize some of the lessons that we learned from the pandemic, from our own experiences, from the research that we conducted, people who didn't fit into the 2.4 kid model really struggled during the pandemic, and these sort of households are not taken into account. Overall, young people felt that they were an afterthought in government policy. There are many policies which were for young people surrounding education, however, within themselves are not that successful, which also meant that the children that didn't fit into this model or lived alternative lifestyles were even worse impacted. And the support systems already struggled to cope and adapt, and we saw this impact within the pandemic. Many people lost the support that they had to begin with, and another experience that a lot of young people face was bereavement, either for the first time or ongoing, which already received very little support and has not really been acknowledged after the pandemic. And following from the water jug analogy, we thought of principles which were needed when thinking about policy and how this was communicated. During our workshops, we conducted an activity looking at policy. We used a system of green, which were policies that we agreed with, that we thought worked well, yellow, which could be adapted and could work, and red, which we thought were not successful. And based on these, we thought of some frameworks which could work to make sure that policy actually worked for people. We thought that during the pandemic, policies were really done to people and not with them, and we believe this needs to change. So we believe that when making policy, the government needs to make sure that there's clarity within the policy, that there's collective effort, and that there's consistency so that people can keep track of them and feel that they aren't being told back and forth. And although these policies should be a general presence, we believe that if we had these principles in place, that they'll be a lot more clear, more understood, and will be more easily adhered to, and that people should be part of these policy changes. We encourage ideas of inclusion and equality in decision making, and that every person's individual circumstances should be of equal concern, and that we should not just make policies to the benefit of some people. And based off our knowledge of water jug, to then replenish the system, these are some of the policies that we advise.
Thank you, Deborah. So one of the policies that we did look at was definitely young people focused. So obviously we do not want to continue having conversations about what we can do for young people without having young people involved in these conversations. So an idea that came up for us was creating panels which frequently evaluate and build upon policies for certain groups. This allows young people to have that platform to be able to share ideas and collaborate and come together, not just to voice what they think is currently lacking from the system that they're receiving, but also what can be done to further support them in the future. As discussed in the previous panel discussion, it came up about diversity and inclusion. So with these panels, we also want to encourage a diverse group of young people to come to the forefront to feature on these panels. This is because we as young people, even those that are sitting right in front of you, are not a monolith, and the conversations and the people that should be representing us do not reflect that as well. And we just also want to be encouraging transparent and honest discussions surrounding the COVID pandemic from now on, especially that regarding young people. Because I feel like regarding our education, our healthcare system, any factor of life that concerns young people, we felt very left out of the discussion, and it's about bringing us back into it.
There are policies that we wish to be reutilized in case of another pandemic. This includes rent freezes and other policies that really helped to take into account inequality, and they were policies which helped overall the well-being of society.
So another thing that happened during COVID was furlough. So it was, so if you were furloughed, 80% of your wages were paid. Which was decent for the people who were earning a lot of money as it was, because if you were earning a lot of money, you could not necessarily afford to lose 20% of your wages, but like you were better off regardless. But if you were earning sort of like less than the average, sort of below the average sort of wage of the country, you're kind of worse off than you already were. So we had a conversation around progressive distribution, so that the people who were earning sort of below the national average would get sort of more support, and the people who were earning significantly above the national average would get sort of less support, purely because they didn't need the support they didn't necessarily need the support financially. Going off a Google search that we did earlier today, we think that the national average was around £26,856. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So yeah, that's sort of like the national average. So yeah, the people who were earning sort of like less than that would kind of get more support than the people who were earning like 104,000, because big difference there, really. So yeah.
So building on community initiatives which really helped a lot of people during the pandemic, we believe that there should be funding pots available for community services and charities, so they can run their services based on their community needs as they know them best, and also that these good ideas can also be carried on further to increase community spirit.
So this is our new normal. We're not trying to recreate the past, and no one wants to make the same mistake twice. So we want to encourage everybody to adopt this kind of, it's not a new way of thinking, it's just allowing yourself to think creatively. And it is okay to make mistakes, but we can't keep making the same mistakes and saying that we're going to make the change and not do anything about it. We're going to make mistakes along the way, but we're going to do something about it if something does go wrong. So this is the new normal. Let's keep it rolling, and every day is a new day, and we want to make it better, and we will make it better.
Medina, is she on isolation?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so one of the ways is to further develop creative apps to limit social isolation and help people stay connected. Apps like Facebook and WhatsApp and Snapchat, all these different social media apps we use for not only young people, but every other community group to come together and have a social space to talk on an app rather than in person. So it was obviously following COVID guidelines, and I think there needs to be further development of these apps to ensure that other marginalized groups of people are able to feel included and find like-minded people who include them in discussions and form new friendships, because in adulthood it's harder to form friendships than it is in school as well. Another point is that every young person should get a named person that is dedicated to them. I believe, following on the point that I said about youth clubs, the introduction of youth clubs is very, very paramount, as young people do deserve a space to be able to be themselves and sit in their creativity and be around people who aren't teachers or parents or authorities or figures, so not police officers or anyone like that. So them having a mentor where that the older prefects in the school, other teachers, volunteers, youth workers, I think that is very important. And there's other countries that the UK can take notes from. So for example, in Sweden, they have youth clubs, and these youth clubs are very closely linked to schools. And they do a lot of projects in the schools and utilizing that space that the school has. After 95, not even 95, 93, school spaces aren't being used. There's so many spaces that we already have. We don't need to be finding new ones. We need to be using the ones that we already have and using them productively and proactively and letting these spaces be community spaces.
Hi again. So one of the other policy approaches that we looked at was having a widely accessible mental health service with an emphasis on not having to fit a set criteria. This obviously comes from a couple of different angles. Accessibility is not just a one size fits all. It can come from disability, it can come from race, it can come from many different aspects of one's lifestyle and a person's identity. It's also reflecting back to the conversation that I mentioned about high risk and low risk. When you are categorizing people, it's not fair if that leads to one group specifically being given less support compared to another one. Also looking at the different ways a person can access the system. Some people can already be under the care of a mental health service. Some people are getting their GP referrals rejected left, right, and centre. And I think a big critique of the mental health services is sometimes their inability to pivot. Sometimes it can be, if you are rejected or if you do come and meet a wall or a crossroads, what's your next step? What do you do when your referral gets rejected? What do you do when you turn 18 and you have to transition to adult services, but you're not given that path to transition? It's about making sure that you are signposted to better services, to people who can help you and not just left there, but also making sure that you do see someone and you are not just written off and that there is support for you by increasing, I guess, the space that we have to hold young people. Yeah.
As I was saying before about digital inequalities within the education system, one policy that we can help in the next pandemic is ring-fence funding for schools to provide resources to students affected by digital inequality. That finds out a few things. It gives everyone an equal chance and it helps people improve learning, so no one is proud that they work and anxious or worried about being left behind. And it eases the anxiety that comes with already being isolated in the pandemic. This could improve a lot of people's mental health, and it can ease the tension on the teachers as well. Because not only are the students struggling in the pandemic, so are the teachers and the parents and everyone.
And finally, following on from Lavina's point, having safe work bubbles, similar to household bubbles, where young people could come together, work in a space where they could have resources such as laptops and the internet to tackle digital inequality, and also provide peer support and help with loneliness, we feel would be a good place for young people while learning.
So we would just like to thank you for obviously attending and giving us your attention during today's presentation. And we just wanted to open up the floor to some discussion and just see if you had any questions or anything you wanted to kind of volunteer.
Just wanted to say, very well done. That was amazing. You guys returned to politics. That was great. Some of the life lessons that you taught us there were truly insightful. Today's been a very insightful day, and the way you guys have talked off has been truly amazing. So well done. Give yourselves a round of applause for that. But just the insight into young people's minds in lockdown, everyone kind of seemed like we forgot about it, like, oh, you're young, you just get on with it. But really, it's the first time in history this has ever happened. So as adults, it was hard. So for you guys to do the young adults, it's hard as well. So well done for putting that together. Brilliant.
I just wanted to ask, I'll probably come like section by section as quickly I can. But from the right hand side, were there any initial reactions that you had to our work or presentation? Or any side really, it's not just specific.
Or any other questions?
Yeah, any other questions actually.
First, it was amazing. The second thing is, it was heartbreaking because it reminded me of somebody who worked with young people in therapy room. I saw the worst of the worst. And for you guys standing here and tell your story is really powerful. There is other element, mental health is in crisis. And no one know about it, no one talking about it. And I think I want you to have this power to open this conversation and be advocate for yourself, because sometimes it broke my heart how young people pick books of the diagnosis is the only way you get help. And that is, it's not about that, because we know the truth about everything. I think one of, for me, is I wanted to say to you, for me, both sides of things. I don't want you to stop the conversation, and I want you to push hard, especially in mental health and school quality. This has been going online. At the same time, our waiting list is a year now, and I'm actually I'm seeing people who've been waiting list for 2022. But this is, it is really, and the percentage should change from the psychosis to other level. But I just keep having, and I feel like this need to take in the big step. You need to push hard. That's what I'm only saying. You really need to push hard, because mental health for young people is underrepresented. For somebody who are professional, I'm not going to say that, I'm going to say it's.
Oh, I just had a quick question. Do you feel like the waiting list for you and like your position is getting quite overwhelmed, because a lot of the cases are just being signposted to just one place, and it's not really kind of given consideration to the complexities behind different kind of cases that you have and how they can be signposted to different places? I mean,
Yes, this is overlapping because comes and for thinking they taking higher risk and group. But then you push into the lower risk, and then you don't have middle, and then you have secondary mental health, and that is where it's high risk. But the problem is somebody who has social anxiety and depression, they need different intervention than somebody who has psychosis, and somebody who having borderline or other psychosis. They need long term to learn to cope and to manage. But the surface is only this side or that side. You're going to have 6 sessions, or we're going to have manage your psychosis for a little bit for a long time. And that is the problem, because as it said, me saying this, and I tell always my patient, my client, that I tell them, I want you to get the power to advocate for yourself. It's not mean you have diagnosis, it's the end of your life. It just, you need to learn how your brain works. And that is what missing. You need to learn. Anxiety, depression, or any diagnosis, it's not mean end of your life. It just, you need to know how your brain works, and then accept it to get this skill to them. And I think that is the key is missing in the system when it comes to it.
Can I just add, as someone who's been on the waiting list since, I don't know, like 2020, I've finally been seen by a therapist, and I finally have regular appointments now. And that's only started like 2 weeks ago. And I remember when I first went to my university about it, they told me that I could either have 3 free sessions and then have to pay. And I was in no position to pay for it, or just wait on the waiting list to just hope for the best. So it does take a very negative toll. And especially for people who are in worse positions than me, I cannot imagine the amount of stuff that they were going through. But yeah.
It is, and this is sad, because your present problem is when they do the initial assessment is that is when they measure where you are, and at the same time sometimes the waiting, we want you to do our best. We really do. We work like more harder than we are, all of us, including But the waiting list, we actually have a meeting monthly, how we tackle the waiting list. Like I had meeting Saturday, we have 165. 6 years old to 35 years old. And we are only how many of us that waiting need to protect man. If we give in all this, and sometimes when some people missing sessions and they're not attending, we need to keep their slice. We cannot give it to somebody. We're not like cheapy. You're missing your session again. If you get your slice, we need to finish with you. And sometimes a lot of people don't attend it, and so we cannot tell them. It is very, at the same time, it's not that much therapy for skills to deal with much now. The skills level is low. That means you're coming back to the surface again and again and again and again.
Thank you. Thank you for that.
Oh, so you hands up on the same time. Yes.
Hey, I just want to say that I really admire you guys for doing that presentation, because when I was younger, I probably would have vomited in the corner and then ran away. So I'm genuinely very impressed. And then I have a question for you all. About, do you think that the impact of the pandemic whilst you was at school in the varying different years that you was at school has changed the direction that you went in, like from that point? Did you have, because I appreciate being young, sometimes you have absolutely no idea what you're going to do, but do you think that because of the pandemic it made it clearer for you, or that you might have gone in a completely different direction?
I went in a totally different direction. I originally was going to study politics and international relations, and I had my heart set on becoming an NGO, and I wanted to be an advocate for people. I still do want to advocate for people, but in a totally different sense. I decided that I just can't bother to go into politics. I don't want to go into that field, and I'm just so sick of the government. So I just decided to do English instead. So now I do English, which is on the complete other side. But I do enjoy it a lot, and sometimes I do regret my decision, but I feel like it is better for me mentally, because I feel much more relaxed and I feel I'm able to have a creative outlet. But 16-year-old me would be quite shocked. Yeah.
It didn't change my direction at all. But to be fair, I finished college in I finished college in 2022 and started uni in 2023, and I was in college at the beginning of the pandemic, so like 2020. But it didn't really. I was doing a science course at college, and like it was kind of hard to go, I'm gonna do law. I'm doing I've been taking part in applied science. I'm gonna go and do law. I also would quite need to join the army, but because I'm not the sort of person to do that. But I'm doing biomed at uni now. Because I always kind of wanted to go into sort of medicine, but I knew I just couldn't deal with a patient vomiting on me and then someone screaming on me and then someone giving birth. I knew I couldn't deal with that, so I was like, right, I'll go into the labs. I either wanted to go into genetics, immunology and biology, or bioethics. When I was, because I've always wanted to like work in a lab. To the point where when I was 8, I was saying I'm going to work in a lab and make a virus that's going to kill everybody. It didn't change anything for me, but that's just because by the time the pandemic rolled around and I started having doubts, I couldn't really. My options were go to uni and do biomed, or don't go at all. So yeah.
I feel like it changed it for me because I wanted to be a teacher. But then I realized how much work it takes to be a teacher. And like, I'm not trying to do that. And plus the pay is very now I kind of want to help people, and I either want to become a cognitive behavioral therapist or CBC. Yeah, nurse. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Just in the spirit of time, I'll just go to the next. I'm not. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, do you mind if I stand up? Yeah, I'm just going to come out in front of your commission, guys. Yeah, okay. My name's Des Blake. I'm from EHAM COVID Champions, as some people might know. We did a presentation today, and there was a few people online. Well, there was several people online who was giving their testimonial, much as like you guys did. It was very positive. But one thing I noticed, and you guys have highlighted it to me today, did anyone see the presentation? Yeah. Did you notice something about the people who was giving their testimonials?
Yeah, it's an absence.
They was all adults, no young people at all. So that's making me think now, are we reaching out? Are we making our organisation accessible to young people? There's something not right. So when I go back, I'm going to feed this back. And it'd be great to access your slides. Is that be possible?
Yeah, no.
And closing, I must say, they saved the best till the last.
How much time we have left, but I'll just go for one more question.
Yeah, thank you. So I also need to say this was the highlight of this whole day. Many of us as scientists have been working on COVID since the beginning, basically, and I felt really like, okay, I'm stuck in my ivory tower, because I realized that what you basically feel is something I've been so detached from over the last 3 years. And so I'm thankful for giving me the opportunity to really reflect on the why we are sitting here and why we are doing this. And for some of us as Paris co-partners, this whole project comes to an end in a few months. But what you provided now was an inspiration to continue to work on it independently from funding, which is like the core driver for many of us in the normal academic life. But thank you so much for giving that.
I just want to ask a very quick question, particularly to Medina and Aisha, because we did a mini version of this at the end of 2021, where we started to work with you guys and think about what the kind of biggest changes were needed for the immediate post-pandemic world. And I just wondered what you guys think has changed between 2021 and that. Like, we're kind of 2 years on from when I last saw you guys, and yeah, I'm just interested because I don't know, my sister's 18 and we're only now realizing the impact of COVID on her and her life and her friendships and her relationships and things that
I feel like now, for me personally, life has finally got back to normal. I feel like this is my first year in education, which has not been affected by COVID. And I'm in uni now. When COVID started, I was in year 11. So I feel like such a completely different person. And sometimes I do thank COVID for that, because I learned so much about myself. But I also feel like mental health has been spoken about so much more over the past couple of years than I've ever heard of it. I never thought I would ever have anxiety. I never thought I'd have any of these things. And I feel like we're all learning so much about ourselves as we're growing, and we're being more open to these more taboo subjects that maybe the older generation, especially in particular cultural communities, would be afraid to have. So I think that is one of the things that I'm mainly thankful for the pandemic showing us.
I feel like the pandemic has taught me a lot of things. Like, I feel like growing up, I was sort of blindsided by the fact that people were struggling. But I feel like it really opened my eyes, like during the pandemic, because I saw how my parents were struggling and I saw how I was struggling. And I feel like it's sort of made me open to how to try and help people and like try to make change and impact on like today's society.
Yeah, I feel like it's more important now to do things on a more local level than it is a national level, because local communities know exactly what they need. They know exactly what they can do. And if national governments sometimes can be quite tone deaf to what's happening in certain local communities because they don't know what's happening, they don't live that life, and it doesn't mean that they're not doing an okay job, because they are doing okay with what they have, but I feel like they could do a lot better by distributing a lot more services to local communities, so local communities can go up and deliver them. And that's why I feel like that's why you need to work a lot with grassroots organizations and different charity groups, because like, even me, I've started working with a lot of grassroots community charities, and I feel like they've done so much more than I've ever seen the government do my whole life. So
Yeah, I feel like you don't start with yourself and you work on others and you don't work on yourself, like where are you gonna go? You have to like really think about yourself and where you stand, like your local community, because if you don't help your local community now, what's gonna happen then?
And are there any more questions?
Yeah, I just want to say it's fantastic to see you back again, and I wasn't, I'm feeling a bit sad that you don't want to go into politics.
I was saying proper politics now.
The reason that I think that is that it really, really matters. You know, basically our fates were decided by about 4 people during the, like, I'm not exaggerating. And we know who those people were. So basically Rishi Sunak, Matt Hancock, Boris Johnson, I think it's 3 people. And I'm not joking about that. That's basically when I've heard people who are inside number 10 and we're trying to produce policy in different ways. So it really, really matters who's in power at the centre. And I know it's totally corrupt at the moment. We us who are a bit older have seen slightly better times in the past, you know, and you know, they're not that they were perfect. And one thing that the reason it matters most of all is that you need that central government funding for that community activity. So you need people at the centre just arguing, oh, it needs to be funded to.
I do want to influence policy,
No,
but I just
haven't
don't.
asked you a question, but I guess my question is, like, how are you going to be advocates if you're not going to be politicians? You seem to have thought about that really long and hard. So what sorts of paths do you see? And also, we need to get you in front of the all parliamentary committee for young people. Basically, we need to do that next. But you know, because there are many ways of being advocates, and one of them is to go and speak directly to the politicians. But like, how might you be advocates if you're not going to be?
I do see myself working with policy, I do, but more definitely grassroots level. Like I work in a youth club back home, and I see certain things that maybe politicians who are up there wouldn't see with young people that I encounter on my day-to-day life, and I just want to influence policy that's going to help them. I don't care for all the big stuff. I want to work solely with grassroots organizations, and I want to influence policy that way. So maybe in turn I could get up there, but I don't particularly care for it, if that makes sense. I want to help my immediate community, not even my immediate community, just any marginalized community groups who are just like have tick boxes of why they can't do well. I just want to help those people.
I think for me, like, I've never really, like it's always been a bit of a joke on my course because of how much stuff I do and how many times I go and annoy politicians and how many times I've spoken to children and how many times it's a constant joke that it's like a sort of fixed politics degree, and it's like, yeah, but the politics degree isn't actually useful at the, because politics in theory and politics in practice are 2 completely separate things. So a politics degree isn't going to help you in the country if you know what I mean. So I think for me, advocate, like I as much as changing big things is really important for me, it's at the same time you're not really changing sort of things as well, changing people's minds, and then those people have got to act on those changed minds. So it's so like I'm never going to influence like Rishi Sunak directly. I'm never going to like do what I'm never going to do what he does, and I'm never going to be like the next Liz Truss, but like and I really promise not. But you know what I mean. So I think it's all like individual. Like I think for me, advocacy is sort of like affecting sort of like people, like an individual level or a community, or sort of like affecting the sort of like what would be seen as like a small group of people, to then so that then you can affect a large group of people over time, because a lot of things can start in a local area and then spread across the country, and so it's not, so I think for me it's more of a case of how do we you know work as a group to then affect bigger things, so I think it's I don't know how to word this, like it's less a case of like I'm gonna go and be in the next cabinet sort of thing, and more a case of how do I influence, like how do I take what I do now, make sure that has an impact on like my generation, the next generation, so that affects that sort of like trickles upwards, if that makes sense. And so then hopefully the next someone will get into power and then sort of like have the make sure that those ideas trickle down to policy. So like yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, what she said. So I think that might be all the time we might have for questions, but I just wanted to reiterate that we are incredibly grateful for you all coming down today and staying to the very end to hear our presentation. So we hope that you have a safe trip back, and thank you for attending.
A massive congratulations to all of you. You've done such a powerful job tonight, and you can tell that the people here have been just like hanging off your words and said that you were one of the highlights, if not the best thing about the day. So you should all feel really proud of yourselves. Later on in the summer, we're going to be producing a full final report, and a lot of these guys have offered to co-author that report. So please, we are going to send it around to all of you. Please take a read. We really appreciate you. Giving us your eyeballs on that. Thank you very much. So I think that's
Oh no, because I wanted to see my dad's.
Well done. Well done.
We go, so I'm glad. I'll say hi
That's what I think. There's a difference between me, I feel being state, right, and when they have happened, yeah, and the kids and mentors and they go, you know what I mean? And they go,